Winterfell was quiet, except for the wind rattling the wooden shutters. The direwolf statue in the courtyard stood silent, as if sensing a change in the air. Ned Stark walked through his castle without greeting the servants by name or strange, motion that made their eyes follow him with curiosity and a hint of fear. He carried the weight of a crown in his heart, though none rested on his head. Word had just arrived. King Robert was dead, and now the small council debated who should rule. He'd ridden south to King's Landing as Hand of the King, but he hadn't expected to return as king himself. Twice he'd refused the offer. Twice he'd said no. But the realm was unraveling, with Joffrey's cruelty obvious and Stannis unwilling to be a king for the people. It had become painfully clear that chaos would follow, and chaos would bring death. A raven's wing flapped across the hall. The last debate had ended hours ago. His bannermen had returned to Winterfell with the news. The small council had agreed by acclamation. For the realm, they'd said. For the realm, those words echoed in Ned's mind. He had been a Stark of Winterfell, dishonorable to turn his back on that. Yet when duty demanded it, he stepped forward. Sansa found him staring at the old fire pit. Her hair was still auburn, though the years in King's Landing had worn her down. She didn't say anything. She understood. Growing up, she'd believed in fairy tales. She'd believed that her father's quiet honor would protect them all. Now she watched him heavy with a crown he didn't want. "Father," she said quietly. He looked down at her. His grey eyes warmed Sansa. He said with gentle strength, "I will not forget Winterfell." He touched the carved direwolf on the arm of his chair. The wood was cool under his hand. "This is not my home any longer," he whispered. Minutes later, the gates opened and a rider entered slowly, with a sealed letter from King's Landing. Ned broke the wax seal. It read, "Ned, the realm calls for your stead. Accept the crown for stability. The armies of the South march, but you alone can hold them back." He did not read them a second time. He gathered nearby lords. Manderly, Charwin, and Dustin had come north to offer support. Each bowed humbly, pledging fealty. He thanked them, voice steady, though his heart trembled. That night, banners flew above Winterfell Stark. Banners, yes, but also the royal arms in the center, a direwolf crowned. Torchlight danced on stone walls as lords and knights gathered. In the yard, the quiet of the north had changed. Hushed murmurs shifted to whispers. King in the north, ... and beyond. During supper, a new burden weighed on Ned. Robb sat beside him, the young wolf, strong and proud, but still learning. The boy-turned-man had the look of a leader, yet he turned to his father and asked, voice small, "Father, will you sit the throne? Will you leave Winterfell?" Ned looked at Robb, feeling all the loss of a simple life, the ease of a single burden. "I stay northern," he said. "Winterfell is my home, but the realm needs peace. If I can give them that, if I can give you all a safer life, then I will." Robb nodded slowly. Beside him, Arya clenched her hands, the face of a girl who remembered her wolf, her freedom. She didn't speak, but in her eyes was the fire of her mother's pragmatism and her brother's strength. Supper finished. Ned excused himself and walked to the ramparts alone. Snow began to fall, soft and slow. The first flakes of the year drifted over the courtyard, over the banners, over the gathered knights. He breathed out, watching his breath mingle with the cold air. He whispered to the wind, "I am here, ... for the realm." As winter deepened, messages came from distant castles. Bolton and Karstark offered troops. The veil spoke of neutrality. The south, those lords who'd served Robert, tested the waters. Some were ready to bend the knee. Others prepared armies. Ned closed his eyes and imagined the road ahead. Wars, alliances, betrayals. He gripped the cold stone and swore, "I will not fail this realm. I will hold this throne with honor." A single crow called in the distance. Winterfell listened. The North knew its new King Evan. A king rooted in the North could hold the realm together. And northern blood flowed in those stone halls, through those gates, under the Stark banner and the Iron Throne. The streets of kings. Landing had changed. Gold cloaks patrolled with a rigid discipline unknown in the days of Joffrey. The common folk, once fearful and silent, now dared to speak again softly, hesitantly, as if still testing the air. Under King Eddard Stark, the capital began to breathe differently. The smell of roses from the Red Keep gardens had returned. The streets were cleaner, but fear did not vanish. It only shifted form in the throne room, where the Iron Throne sat like a beast of blades and shadows. Ned stood silently, eyeing its jagged cruelty. He still hadn't sat on it. He ruled from the council chamber, refused the grandeur of public declarations, and refused to wear a crown. Yet they called him king, a king reluctant, a king by duty, not desire. Varys entered, quiet as always. "Your Grace," he said with a bow. Ned turned, expression unreadable. "Speak plainly," Ned said. "The lords of the Reach gather under Seer Loras Tyrell's command," Varys replied. "They question your legitimacy, though they avoid open rebellion. The Lannisters, however, are less discreet." Ned's jaw clenched. Tywin, marching from Casterly Rock, and his daughter Queen Cersei has vanished. For the first time in days, Ned felt a familiar anger swell. "She killed Robert," he muttered, "poison or lies, and Joffrey's blood is not his." He'd discovered the truth too late, back when the boy had already claimed the throne. Now Cersei had gone into the wind, and Tywin brought fire with him. "They'll make it a war," Ned said darkly. "They already have," Varys whispered. "They only wait for your misstep." The next day, in the council chamber, Ned assembled his allies. Seer Davos from the Stormlands had answered his call. Maester Luwin had been brought from Winterfell to serve as royal advisor. Even Seer Barristan Selmy had returned to the keep, refusing to serve under Joffrey and instead pledging loyalty to the man he believed would protect the realm. Ned stood at the head of the table. "We will not start this war, but we will not run from it either. The Lannisters have torn this realm apart long enough." Seer Davos cleared his throat. "Then we must act quickly. Their gold buys men faster than loyalty does." Ned nodded. "Robb rides to Riverrun. He will gather the Tully forces. We will face Tywin on open ground before he reaches the capital. No sieges, no starvation. This war ends before it poisons every corner of Westeros." Later that evening, Robb entered his father's chambers, already armored, grey wind pacing beside him. He was taller now, more sure, but his eyes still looked for Ned's approval. "I'll make you proud," Robb said. "You already have," Ned replied. They embraced briefly. Stark men didn't often show affection, but it was there, buried in every wordless moment. Ned watched him ride out at dawn, leading 3,000 men with the Tully banner beside the direwolf. Arya, standing beside her father, whispered, "He looks like Uncle Brandon." Ned placed a hand on her shoulder. "He looks like a Stark." But the peace wouldn't hold. 2 nights later, news came ravens from the east. Daenerys Targaryen had landed in Dawn with dragons. The Martells welcomed her, claiming vengeance for Ilya and her children. Another war front, another fire to fight. Sansa heard the news first. She confronted her father in the throne room. She is the last of her line. They say she's merciful. Ned looked at her carefully. Mercy is a gift rare in rulers. So is wisdom. Sansa hesitated. So is love. He turned away. Love doesn't keep the peace, and dragons don't recognize borders. By week's end, the realm was breaking again. The Tyrells threatened the western border. The land pushed north, and a queen with dragons demanded the throne once stolen from her father. Ned sat alone in his chambers. Parchment letters before him, offers, threats, cries for help. He felt the realm like a torn cloak in his hands, threads fraying at the ends. He whispered into the cold air, "What would you have done, Robert? Would you have burned them all, like Ares, or drunk yourself blind while the fires spread?" He looked out the window. The Iron Throne gleamed faintly in the candlelight, and for the first time since Robert's fall, Ned Stark sat on the throne, only for a moment, only to feel the metal beneath him. Cold, unforgiving, sharp, he stood again. Blood pricking his hand where the blade caught him, and he understood. The blood that welled from his hand was no accident. The Iron Throne didn't forgive hesitation. It sensed weakness like a wolf smells fear. Ned Stark looked at the small cut on his palm, barely more than a scratch, and yet it spoke volumes. Every king before him had bled on those blades. A reminder, ruling meant sacrifice. As dawn broke, the city buzzed with tension. Rumors swirled like crows. The queen with dragons was flying north. Robb Stark was marching south, and Tywin Lannister was nearing Harrenhal. The streets of King's Landing murmured with prayers, curses, and fears. Maester Luwin entered quietly. "A raven from Dragonstone," he said, handing over the scroll. Ned unrolled it with calloused fingers. The seal bore the stag and flaming heart Stannis. Bartheon. That letter was curt. "You sit a throne meant for the true heir. Your honor has blinded you. Bend the knee or prepare for war." Ned let out a long breath. Even now, he believes himself the only righteous man alive. Luwin hesitated. "Stannis does not bluff, I know." Later that day, Ned met with the council. Davos was grim. "We have 3 fronts now. Tywin in the west, Daenerys in the south, Stannis from the sea. If even one breaks our line, King's Landing falls." Varys, always careful, added, "And the people, they remember. Dragons, some fear them, some hope." Ned stood in silence for a long time before speaking. "We cannot win 3 wars. We must end one before the others begin. Tywin comes first." He turned to Seer Barristan, "Ride to Riverrun. Join Robb. Tell him to draw Tywin into the Riverlands. Bleed him if he can, but hold him there." To Davos, he said Stannis must be stalled. "You know him. Speak with him. Offer him the justice he's never had, maybe even Dragonstone, but keep him from the capital." Davos nodded reluctantly. As the council broke, Ned found himself alone with Varys. "You don't sleep," Ned observed. "Not while the kingdom bleeds," Varys replied softly. "Why did you support me?" Ned asked. "You once served Ares, then Robert, now me." Varys looked him in the eye. "Because you're the only one who doesn't want the throne. That's why you deserve it." That night, Arya slipped out again. She trained in the shadows of the Red Keep, blade in hand. Needle flashed under moonlight as she danced with invisible enemies. Her father found her atop the walls, hair wind-tangled, breath steady. "You move like a cat," he said. "I move like Sirio taught me," she whispered. "You'll need more than dancing soon," he said. "War is not a game." She turned to him, fierce. "Then teach me." For a moment, Ned saw Lyanna in Hertha, same wildfire, the same refusal to bend. "When the war is over," he promised, but he didn't believe it would end easily. 3 days later, Robb sent a raven. "We have engaged Tywin near the Trident. He brought more men than expected. Lord Tully fights beside us. We hold ... for now." The war had begun in earnest, and Daenerys, another raven, came from dawn. Her dragons had hatched. 3 of them, and they grew fast. The Dornish were whispering the word queen again, as if Rhaegar's ghost walked beside her. Ned met with Sansa again in the gardens. She looked tired, but wiser. "What will you do when she comes?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't want to kill her. I don't want to fight dragons. But you will." "I must." "If she threatens the peace." Sansa looked away. "Maybe she's the peace." He didn't answer that night. Ned stood on the balcony of the Red Keep. The city stretched before him, its lights flickering like 1,000 stars. But beyond the walls, fires burned, camps, armies, enemies, and perhaps the future. He whispered into the wind. "Winter is coming, but so is fire." And somewhere in the dark sky, unseen by all in the capital, a dragon's shadow passed silently across the moon. The black smoke over the Trident carried a bitter scent of steel, ash, and blood. Ravens arrived each morning now, some with broken seals and some with hastily scrawled writing soaked in sweat. Robb Stark had held the line, but only just. Tywin Lannister fought like a man with nothing to lose and every insult to avenge. Ned stood beside the war table, fingers pressed against the wood. The Riverlands were burning. The Lannisters had torched dozens of villages, and yet Robb, with the Tullys, had repelled them at Red Fork. Still, the war would not end quickly. Tywin had pulled back not because he was beaten, but because he was waiting for something. "A second blow," Seer Barristan said, reading the map. "He's stalling. For more men. Or more chaos." Varys agreed. "He has contacts in the Reach. If the Tyrells move in his favor, you'll face 2 lions instead of 1. Ned looked at the ink-splotched map. The whole realm was divided into colored blocks and lines. But real people lived behind those lines. Small folk, children, broken men. He turned to Luwin. "Send word to every major house. No new taxes, no levies without consent. The war is on the shoulders of kings, not farmers." "A bold move," Luwin murmured, "but perhaps ... the right one." Later that evening, Davos returned from Dragonstone. His face was grim, his hair soaked in sea salt. He smelled of old smoke and anger. "Stannis won't yield," he said. "But he won't march either, not yet. He says if you defeat Tywin, then he'll deal with you himself." Ned exhaled, and Daenerys. Davos hesitated. "She moves faster than expected. She's already reached Blackhaven. The lords of the Stormlands fear her dragons more than they love Stannis." That night, Sansa brought Arya into the king's chamber without warning. Arya had blood on her sleeve and defiance in her eyes. "She was caught outside the keep," Sansa said. "With a knife." Ned turned slowly. "What were you doing?" Hunting, Arya said. For rats. For secrets. Someone's spying for the Lannisters. I heard 2 gold cloaks talking about betraying the gates if Tywin reaches the city. Ned stared hard, then said, "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," she snapped. "I'm not a child anymore." Sansa flinched. Ned looked between them, a father trying to balance honor, war, and 2 daughters who had seen too much. He softened. "Next time, you tell me before you act." "I didn't think you'd let me," Arya said bitterly. "I probably wouldn't," he admitted, "but I need your eyes. This city's filled with shadows." Arya's expression didn't change, but she nodded later, as silence filled the corridors. Ned met Varys near the dungeons. The spider carried a torch and led him through old tunnels beneath the Red Keep. "I found something," Varys said. "A room full of scrolls, sealed by Maegor's hand. Forgotten, ... until now." He opened a chamber, and Ned stepped in. Scrolls lined the walls, written in Valyrian and tongues older than Westeros itself. One scroll had a dragon's sigil cracked and faded. "It speaks of a prophecy," Varys whispered. "A child born of fire and storm, who brings death to the cold and truth to the flame." Ned stared at it. "Daenerys, perhaps," Varys said, "or perhaps something worse. Prophecy is like wildfire, unpredictable and dangerous in the wrong hands." Ned ran a hand over the faded words. "I don't believe in prophecy." "You will," Varys said by morning. Another raven came from the wall. Jon Snow wrote it with trembling hands. "Something stirs beyond the Frostfangs. Not wildlings, not men. They walk again, cold, silent, death." Ned gripped the letter. The words felt colder than the northern winds. A knock broke the silence. It was Arya again. She held a dagger. "This was planted in your room," she said, "hidden under your bed." Ned stared at it. Valyrian steel, not northern made. A message. Someone in the city wanted him dead, and beyond the city, death itself was marching. The dagger gleamed with quiet menace, its dark hilt worn smooth by another man's hand. Ned turned it over slowly. Valyrian steel rare, priceless, and deadly. This wasn't a weapon meant for intimidation. It was meant to kill. Arya stood across from him, defiant but breathing harder now, as if the weight of what she'd found was only just settling in. "Who would do this?" she asked, eyes sharp with suspicion. Ned didn't answer immediately. He set the dagger down carefully and walked to the window, looking out across King's Landing. The city buzzed below, oblivious to its king's looming execution. A Lannister blade, perhaps, or someone who wants me to believe it is. Arya moved closer. "You'd think it's someone in the keep." "I think this city is full of ghosts," he muttered, and some of them were smiling faces. The next morning, Ned doubled the guard on the royal chambers. He summoned Seer, Barristan, Davos, and Varys. The room was sealed. "There was an attempt on my life last night," he said without hesitation. Barristan frowned. "Do we suspect Tywin?" "I suspect everyone," Ned replied. Varys Garm, as ever, spoke softly. "There are whispers. Gold cloaks with loyalty still to the Queen Regent. Cersei is gone, yes, but her claws are deep." Ned nodded grimly. "I want them found, rooted out, quietly." "And the people?" Davos asked. "They'll hear of this. They already have," Varys said. "And many whisper that perhaps the Iron Throne brings more curse than blessing." Ned stared at the council table. "They may be right." As the investigation unfolded, news came from the Riverlands. Robb had driven Tywin back across the Trident, but at great cost. Lord Tully was wounded. Hundreds lay dead along the banks. Tywin retreated toward Harrenhal. And then the worst. Jaime Lannister had escaped capture and was rallying a fresh force. Near the Gold Road, more blood to spill. And from the south came a different message. This one carried not by Raven, but by a rider who had come through fire. Daenerys Targaryen had sent an envoy. The man was Dornish, cloaked in red silk, bearing a scroll with her personal seal, three-headed dragon inked in flame. Ned read it aloud. In the council chamber, Lord Eddard Stark, now crowned king, I do not seek vengeance, but justice. I will not attack kings. Landing, if you agree to meet, alone, at Storm's End. Let us speak not as conqueror and usurper, but as those who seek to end the bleeding of Westeros. The room was silent. She brings dragons, Barristan said, cautiously, and asks for a meeting. Sounds like bait. She could have brought fire to the capital, Davos argued. But she didn't. She sends words instead. And words can be sharper than blades. Varys added. Ned didn't answer for a long time when he finally spoke. It was with the voice of a man who had seen too many innocents buried. I will go. The room erupted. You cannot, Davos snapped. Storm's End is not secure. I know. Barristan was pale. If this is a trap, then it's mine to spring, Ned said. I will not be remembered as a king who ruled through war and pride. If there's even a chance she speaks the truth, then I must hear it. He left 2 days later with a dozen sworn men and Arya, who refused to stay behind. Sansa remained in the capital, reluctant but regal, keeping the court steady. The journey to Storm's End was silent and grim. Banners hung limp in the summer heat. Roads that once saw trade now carried only the march of soldiers as they reached the ancient fortress by the sea. Dragons flew overhead majestic, terrifying, otherworldly. Arya gripped her sword. Even the men whispered prayers. Daenerys stood, alone at the gates. She wore no crown, only a silver braid and a cloak of dragon-scale black. Her eyes burned with both fire and sadness. Lord Stark, she greeted Queen Daenerys, he replied, and together, with only the waves crashing behind them, they entered Storm's End. No banners, no guards, just fire, ice, and a chance at peace. Storm's End was colder than expected, though the sea breeze carried no snow. It was the tension that chilled the air, the kind that crept into bones and sat behind every word. Daenerys led Ned through the ancient halls. They walked in. Silence, past faded banners and burnt-out torches. No guards flanked her. No advisors whispered at her side. Her dragons circled the skies above, casting long shadows that danced along the stone. Inside the solar, she turned and faced him fully. You came, she said, more surprised than relieved. I gave my word, Ned replied. He studied her face. She was young, but not naive. Her silver hair framed a sharp jaw and sharper eyes. She had the calm of someone who had watched cities fall, the silence of someone who had burned tyrants alive. I don't want your throne, Ned said bluntly. I didn't even want my crown. She tilted her head. But you took it. I took it to stop war, and yet here we are. They stood like statues for a moment, ancient powers in a new world. Then Daenerys stepped closer. I offer you peace, she said. You can keep the north, keep your name, but let the realm choose its queen. Not a man crowned by fear, Let the people decide. Ned narrowed his eyes. You mean let them choose you? I mean let them choose stability. I bring dragons, yes, but also hope. People follow me not out of fear, but faith. Ned leaned forward. You bring fire. Fire never brings peace. And you bring honor, she countered. And honor has bled the realm for decades. His silence answered her. Then she softened. I know who your bastard is. Jon Snow. He is not your son, is he? Ned's body stiffened. She continued. He is Rhaegar's and Lyanna's, my blood, my family. His face darkened. You speak of things that could destroy him. I speak of truths that already have, she said gently. He's a Targaryen, and so am I. The realm doesn't need a Stark or a dragon. It needs both. He sat down, slow, as if the weight of the world had finally pressed him into the chair. You want him to take the throne? No, she said. I want him beside me. Ned looked up. You want to marry him? I want to unite what's been broken since Robert's rebellion. North and south, ice and fire. For the first time in weeks, Ned Stark didn't know what to say. She walked to the window, her voice low. I know what they say about my father, and they're all true. But I'm not him. I don't want to burn cities. I want to build them. Outside, Arya trained in the yard with Grey Worm. The sun was falling. The dragons were resting. The war paused, suspended by a fragile thread of conversation. I'll speak to Jon, Ned finally said. But if he refuses, then we fight, Daenerys said. But not today. They broke bread that night in silence. No wine, no music. Just the ocean's roar and the weight of tomorrow. At dawn, Ned rode back to King's Landing. Arya asked him nothing on the way. She only glanced at him once, her face unreadable. When they reached the gates, a raven waited. Robb was missing. His camp near the neck had been overrun. No word of capture, no word of death, just gone. And the wall sent another message. They've breached the first watchtower. We need help. The dead do not rest. Ned dropped the scroll. The city had not collapsed in his absence. Sansa held the court together, wise and soft-spoken, a queen without a crown. She kissed his cheek when he arrived and whispered, You look more tired than when you left. I am, he said. He entered the throne room once more, looked at the iron throne, empty and cruel. Then to the stained glass above it, colors of war, kings and false gods. He turned to the hall, his voice loud and calm. Send a raven, to the wall, to Daenerys, to every house. There is no king. There is no queen. There is only the realm. And it must stand, or all of us will fall. The guards shifted, the lords murmured, but no one stepped forward to object. Ned Stark did. Not sit the throne again. He ruled from beside it, not above it. And when the winds grew colder and the skies darker, the people finally understood this was no longer a Game of Thrones. This was a fight for survival, and winter had truly come.